I am. And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Red Hoop Talk. I'm Roy, and this is my beautiful sister Shannon, and we are here once again on a Friday night to hang out with all of you. And this is actually your Red Hoop Talk. And let me see if I can open up the. How are you doing, Shannon?
I'm doing okay. Hello, everyone out there in YouTube and Facebook land. Glad. I hope you will be joining us and watching. We have some incredible guests and some interesting conversations we're going to have this evening. And Roy, I'm sure, is going to talk to us about TikTok. And and we were just having a conversation about we need music desperately. And we need a little intro video to bring us in and with a little music. So how are we going to make that happen, Roy?
We have some people working on some music for us, but there are some things that I can do with the music by pulling what's called Creative Commons in YouTube. There are artists that actually do native music and then put it up on Facebook or YouTube for anyone to use. It's called Creative Commons. So if there's any video or audio there, you can actually use it for your show without there being any copyright issues.
But are they native artists in this common thing?
Really? Are you going to rain on that parade too? You have to check them out, obviously.
I'm absolutely going to rain on that parade. We are going to use native artists. I don't
have to look. What made you think that I was going to get like Ted Nugent or something on and put them on there?
But I don't want just native inspired flute music playing in the. We're going
to find a good artist and go and represent them, because then we get to give them credit for their artwork that they're making, and we get to link them to everybody who's, watching the show or comes and tunes in, and we'll give them credit for that. And that way their page can get viewed and we can have some music.
That would be so awesome. And I remember our guest from the past, Brian Frijo. He offered to do that for us. So
we do need to get back with Brian. Yes. Soon. We need to talk to Brian.
And
iced coffee.
What are you drinking? Iced coffee? Man, I need some of that.
I'm gonna have a long night, so I'm getting prepped here.
Okay.
I can do the Donald Trump drink, right? Is that how he does it? Like that?
I am so out of touch with what actually is happening on regular news sources. I just don't pay attention. So what's going on out there in the?
Well, no, that was like months ago. They were bagging on him for that because he can't drink regularly. He has to hold it with two hands to drink his water. You've never seen him do that?
No.
Yeah, like a whole mashup of it on YouTube of him trying to drink his water. You could pull it up.
Yeah, I could. But
so let's first say thank you to the first people of California, the Senos and the Gabrielinos. Want to give them thanks for letting us be on their place. And Shannon, where are you from?
Also want to give a shout out and recognize the first peoples from what is now called Maryland, the Piscataway people, and the Delaware, and others also traversed across this area. Grateful to be here, and thank you all for caretaking for this place.
Oh.
And I'm Shannon. I'm from the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. We don't often say where we're from anymore. We just kind of assume folks know who we are and where we're from, Roy. So we should.
My name is Roy Melendez, and I am from the Caddo-Adayas Nation of Louisiana. Caddos are mostly in Oklahoma, but my unrecognized clan is in Louisiana.
So that's us. So now what the hell are we going to do?
You don't have any updates of any news?
Tons of updates. There's
that gives us
amazing good news happening this week.
There's some really good stuff happening. Now, I didn't get to deep dive enough into it, but I'm sure that we can kind of open it up. And our awesome chat room, by the way, we've got Sandra is in there again.
Hi, Sandra.
We got JD. And Lance is in there like always. Also, I like Lance. Gives us a lot of good
Yes, but
constructive
I don't
questions.
often understand what Lance is saying. Lance, you got to be really like literal for me to understand what the hell you're saying. You have beautiful language, but most of the time I don't understand it. Got to lift with the hips. What does that mean?
You gotta lift with the hips. You don't understand that?
No, I'm lifting. What does that mean?
You gotta lift with the hips. You don't get that?
No.
Okay.
Is it?
And then JD says TikTok. So he wants to hear about TikTok, or maybe he got on TikTok and he started watching it.
Hear about TikTok. Well, I've got good news to share. I'm happy to start getting into the news. Do you want some news now?
Let's have it, sis. Let's have it.
Let me
Give
see.
it to us. Give it to us. Give it to us.
Here I go to try to get the sharing going here. We want to start with the Grizzly Bears. So victory for Yellowstone's Grizzly Bears as the court rules. This is the Ninth Circuit Court ruled that they cannot be hunted. So the current administration basically opened up sports hunting, trophy hunting of grizzly bears in tribes and conservation groups fought it in court and won. So the grizzly bears are being protected now, and the provisions in the Endangered Species Act are being protected, and Brother Bear is I'm sure happy about it. So that's some excellent news on the environmental front. We had talked a lot about how Trump is rolling back a lot of the environmental regulations. So this is one he didn't get to roll back.
I call him Twitler. So Twitler's little son didn't get what he wanted. Go out there and shoot bears.
Shoot a bear. Yeah, he didn't get to do that.
Oh.
Yeah. And then let me see where we are. Where's this? So tribes nationwide cheer DAPL shut down
Shut them bitches down.
in another incredible victory in court. DAPL is not going to be doing anything for probably about 3 years. So the court ordered that further tribal consultation had to take place and an environmental impact statement. And what an environmental impact statement does is it does full tribal consultation. It takes public comment. It does scientific studies and tries to determine whether there's alternative things that can happen to protect the environment. And those things take about 3 years. So guess what's going to happen in 3 years? Guess who will be in the administration? It won't be Trump.
So, wow, listen to that. What a change of thought in your little brain there. Wow. The sky's not falling anymore. You just said he's not going to be there. Was that a prediction from you, Shannon, that we're not going to have
no, because I don't
as our president anymore?
Wrong. I'm starting to get a more confident feeling that his days are extremely numbered. Those people, they scare me. I can't believe how we venerate individuals who have no consideration for people different than they are. And I can't believe when these people get in leadership and people like that scare me. They just scare me.
Well, he's just psychotic on top of all of the misogyny and racism and everything else that the man has in him. He's psychotic. I mean, he's got issues. And on top of that, he's an elder who hasn't aged. His brain hasn't aged well too. So he's got all kinds of problems going. We're in deep fry oil right here on this one. This is ugly. But I think you're right, like I've always been, and he's on his way out the door. And,
well, okay. So Lance is explaining now what
I was going to throw that up for you. I have my finger on the button. So it says, for Trump to drink his water, he needs to lift at the hips. So so instead of he needs to, really get his legs underneath it and get into it, and get that water up in there. into his Twitler face. Into his,
and he's also, Lance is asking if appeals take that long. And if Lance, if you're referring to the DAPL, hopefully that court case won't be appealed. That's still a possibility that case will be appealed. But the whole environmental impact statement work takes up to 3 years. And so
that's what they're forced to do, is that
right.
Environmental impact statement.
And that's what
the tribes were fighting for, and that's what they got
from the very beginning. Exactly.
One for the skins, baby. One for the skins and one for the bears.
Okay, I'm going to pull up one more thing.
Oh, we have another one?
We have more good news. I can't believe it.
That's 3 good news, because you also said that you're on the side that Twitler's on his way out. So that's like 3 good news. So this is going to be 4 to make it the magic number, or native number.
So let me tell you what we're looking at here. If you can see on the video, we're looking at the exterior boundaries of the reservations of the 5 civilized tribes. And you see there in yellow is the Muscogee Creek Nation and their exterior boundaries. Geez, I wonder what we're talking about. Look, Supreme Court says much of eastern Oklahoma remains Indian land. Yes. So there's a court case. It's actually a criminal case where Creek man committed a felony, and the state court tried to assert jurisdiction over him. And he said, nope, you can't do that. You don't have jurisdiction. This is Indian land. And I should be in tribal court or federal court. And so this case has made it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where the U.S. Supreme Court did validate that Congress never extinguished the exterior boundaries of the Muscogee Creek Nation Reservation. So even though allotment has come through there, even though the state has asserted jurisdiction in various areas within those exterior boundaries, the court ruled, nope, never happened. So you're going to see, if you Google this case, you're going to see all these headlines that say, Eastern Oklahoma is all Indian land, and people are freaking out. They think, Indians are coming to take their land and knocking on their doors. And
oh, that just puts chills up my spine. So I had somebody tweeted to me in my my tweeter. Somebody tweeted. I tweeted that out. So when the news came through, I tweeted it out, right? So I tweeted it, and I was, getting some people some of my Indian friends were getting on there and liking the tweets and stuff. And then one of my not so Indian friends got on there and said, so does this mean that Americans lost their land? That there were Americans that lost their land? And I said, nope, they got it back.
But it's really, it doesn't have anything to do with land title. It's not about land title. It's about jurisdiction.
Exactly.
And who has the right to assert sovereignty over a certain area of land. And what I'm hearing from the 5 tribes there is, they've always had good relationships with the state. Of course, some of them have, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your kind of relationship with the state of Oklahoma. I'm a little bit pessimistic about that.
No.
But they are working through this to determine how best to move forward in a way that supports tribal sovereignty. And of course, the state is going to want to protect its interests as well. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of things coming out of Oklahoma.
Oh yeah. Come on, guys. When you got your foot in the door, just kick that sumbitch in and go inside. Go get them. Go get them. I love it. I love it. Little victories, and little victories everywhere are starting to happen. It's just like, I think it's time for Indian Spring. I think that's what's happening right now. It's a little what? Indian Spring, a little Indian Spring going on, where we're going to start seeing some things happen. And as soon as the climate is a little politically more leaning towards the native side, then I think we're even going to get more footing. I'm excited to see what the next few years are going to bring, because people have been out there busting their asses and dying and working hard and protesting and living underneath this, foot on the neck for a long time. So you people that have been out there doing the work, man, I hope you can find the energy to give it one more push these next few years and just get out there and fight, because the crack is in the dam, and it's time to break that son of a bitch down. That's what's going on. I love it. I love it. Look at all that good news. 4 good newses from Shannon. Wow.
Surprising.
That is like, are you going to be okay? Are you going to have to go like eat some pessimism a little later after the show just to like refuel yourself?
I'm sure. I can tell you something that like really pissed me off this week. If you really want to know,
no. Let's not go there. I like it with the rainbows and sunshine shooting out your ass right now. Let's just keep it at that and not go there. Let's just save that for next week. Okay, we'll save your story for next week, because we got some guests that I want to bring on, because we had some fun, just chatting with them, getting their deal ready, doing a little test run. So this is going to be cool. We're going to have some good conversations, and we're going to have some fun. You ready, chat room? Get your questions ready. We're going to have a good time here, and I'm going to let Shannon introduce our friends.
You're going to introduce.
I'm not doing it because I can't say that tribe's name. It's going to come out bad, and we've already made some jokes, and I don't want to do that jokes in public. It was all fine behind closed doors, and it was all fun and games, but I ain't gonna get spanked. That's for sure. So
okay.
Have at it, sis.
I'll do it one of these days, though, Roy. You're going to have to do a good introduction. So I
introduce you every show.
I said a good introduction. So let me introduce my two wonderful women who I feel so deeply about, and so grateful that they agreed to be with us tonight. I want to introduce you to Lisa, or Tiger, if you'd like to call her Tiger, by her tiger name, her cat name, Lisa Martin, who's a citizen of the Muscogee Creek Nation, and Shannon Martin, who's an enrolled citizen of the Match-E-Be-Nash-She-Wish band of Pottawatomi. Did I say it right?
You said it.
Some people say Gun Lake tribe. And both work for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe up in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And they have tons of work in community building, boarding school, healing, repatriation, cultural preservation. So we're going to have a really great discussion with them. And did I forget? They are coming to us live from Lesbian Central.
Or the Lesbian
Coalition.
All right. Well, here they are. Let's bring them up.
Love and happiness. Let's bring on Lisa and Shannon. There they are.
Hey, Lisa. Hey, Shannon. How you guys doing?
Buju, Wabshka Magizi Queen, Dishnikas, Muscogee and Dow Binishi and Doram. I am Lisa Martin, enrolled member of the proud Muscogee Nation of Oklahoma Bird Clan. And I'm just really happy to be invited to this conversation. Happy to pray and live and work among the beautiful Anishinabe people of Central Michigan. So thank you.
Well, Buju, Anishinaabe, Buju, Nindaway Nani Duk, and Buju, two Spirit Nation people. Nungle Quadishnikas, Buju and Dodem, Match-E-Be-Nash-She-Wish, Pottawatomi, Minwa, Lakuta Ray, Lake Superior, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Kwayandao, Wabajo, Ziibiwing, Donjaba, Minwa, Saginaw, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, King and Donjaba, Ziibiwing Center of Anishinaabe Culture and Lifeways Director and Dow. Shaganashi Moen Majima. I'm Shannon Martin, and I'm an enrolled citizen with the Match-E-Be-Nash-She-Wish band of Pottawatomi Indians of the Gun Lake tribe on my mother's side, and a descendant on my father's side of the Lakuta band of Lake Superior Ojibwe people. And I'm also a Lynx Clan member from my dad's side.
Ooh,
See, they said it better than we ever could.
dang straight. That's why I didn't do it. I wasn't going to butcher that shit. No way. There are too many women in this room for me to mess anything up.
It's about time.
Yeah. You've been
All right. So why don't we just get started? Thank you for giving us a beautiful introduction. Do you want to talk a little bit more about where you come from and how you got to be where you are?
Okay, Shannon's poking me to go first. You know, I am, you know, half Muscogee and then half German Austrian. And so I had this really sort of blended sort of upbringing. I didn't really grow up with Native teachings. I was one of those people that didn't have those opportunities, but had a lot of good blessings on my non-Native side. On the other side, you know, even though you don't necessarily grow up with the teachings, sometimes you still grow up with the racism and the prejudice. And so, you know, I know that my sister and I both had experienced things like that. And so I didn't know any other Native people. We were the only Native people in our community where we grew up. And so I went to go be an anthropologist because I wanted to learn about Indians because I didn't know anything about how to be an Indian. And it led me down strange and winding paths, and I ended up where I'm supposed to be. And now I've been working in Indian country for almost 30 years.
Nice.
Yeah, and I grew up in Gun Lake, Pottawatomi territory. My father retired out of the United States Air Force after 10 years. He served both in the Korean War and Vietnam. And he met and fell in love with a beautiful Pottawatomi girl, my mom, Sydney, when he was stationed at Wordsmith Air Force Base up in the Alpena, Tawa City area. And they moved to the area where I was born and raised. And I'm technically in the Salem Indian settlement. The Match-E-Be-Nash-She-Wish people, of course, were one of the tribes that were identified to be moved into the Oklahoma territory, but many of our ancestors hid out in the woods and fled to other tribal territories where they were adopted into those tribes. But singular and smaller family groups and clans hid and stayed and resided in the Bradley Indian Settlement and the Salem Indian Settlement and purchased land and their own private property with their own means. So I was born and raised there and grew up in a household that was thriving in the 70s movement. So my folks loved to be able to go to powwows, and they were taking us to ceremonies when we were growing up. We had American Indian movement folks camping out in our front yard, and we were hiding treaty fish, fishermen with their loads they were taking down to Chicago. And it was just an amazing childhood. My grandmother was on my mother's side, was a Pottawatomi basket weaver. And she lived just a stone's throw down the road from where I was raised. So I used to stay at her home when my folks worked during the summers and growing up. And she had no running water. And it was a beautiful upbringing that she was part of my parenting so that I could understand and learn about the beautiful ways of our people, because we'd go out foraging and picking medicines and food along the road and scooping up snapping turtles for soup and all those good things. So she was a good grandma and taught us how to weave baskets up. So it was a very good upbringing. Fortunate to go to the longest walk. My mom and her best friend, my Aunt Dolores, took me and her sons to Washington, where we marched on Washington during the longest walk. I think that was 1979. So it was good, taking over bridges and tunnels growing up, and just being raised in a home that was an activist, but also a culturally strong home that shared generously who we were and who we are to school groups and Girl and Boy Scout troops.
Well, and you all still are so gracious. I love to be around you all and your family. Y'all are so gracious and loving. It's like y'all are like a second family. It's really
Oh,
nice to be around y'all. So how did you guys meet? I remember you telling me this story, and if you don't want to share it, that's okay too.
well, I was just coming off a sort of a long-term relationship, and I was single for about a year. And a friend, colleague of mine, we were having a chat at work, and he just said, I think you should call Lisa Tiger up. And I said, okay, why is that? He goes, well, I think just take her out to dinner or go out for coffee or something. And so he hands me her phone number, and I'm like, okay. So I gave her a call, and I took her out, and we had a nice dinner. To this day, we don't know where we went or what we had for dinner. And we had a long conversation that we both can't remember at this point. But then I dropped her off, and we were talking in my car as she was getting out of the car. And then I gave her a little smooch, and she seemed, excited about it, the little kiss. And then she hopped out of the car, and then she ghosted me. I didn't hear from her. I tried to email her. I tried to, call her up. And then through the Moccasin Telegraph, I found out she picked up and moved to Madison, Wisconsin. So at that point, I thought, oh, okay, that's all right. That was the first date and the last date.
Oh, no.
And about 3 years ago, she pops up again, and she shows up at a meeting, a program directors meeting at the reservation. And she's introduced as the new grant specialist, strategic specialist. And she came over and said hello and gave me a hug. And I said, it's nice to see you. I'm glad you're back here in the community. And then that was it. And I ghosted her for months.
Oh my gosh. I went to like every single meeting that I knew she was going to be at. I was just like throwing myself in front of her. And like one time I remember she was like right in front of me, and I was like running really fast trying to get to the door. And then I was like, she's going to make it outside before I can catch her and talk to her. Oh my gosh. I did everything but throw myself in front of her car trying to get her attention.
She even went to funerals and would like, terrible.
That's low. That's some low shit right there.
That was not.
But we, of course, Facebook is kind of magical in different ways. And we started chatting on Messenger. And then the next thing you know, we were hanging out. And we just got married last year.
Hey, congratulations.
We got married 4 times.
4 times.
Yeah, I was going to say, you all just didn't get married last year. You got married successively.
Yeah, I just, you get a girl like this, you're going to want to nail it down, man. We got married once every season last year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
In different ways too. So like share with Roy what you all, I just think this is awesome. I never thought about doing anything like that.
Well, we planned a small family, close family, intimate ceremony that my dad, we had him conduct, but that blew up into well over 100 people because our folks and everybody wanted to come. So that was on April 27th, which is the day after my birthday. And we rented out the lobby of the Ziibiwing Center where I work. And we filled the little lobby up to capacity, and it was a beautiful ceremony. Mm-hmm. And then we couldn't forego, because I'm a Mediwin person, I follow Mediwin way of life, we couldn't forego and not recognize Tiger's spiritual path. And she's a thirsty dancer or sun dancer. So we said, well, we need to, have a commitment ceremony at the tree because she was fasting and dancing for 4 days last June. And that was her 16th year consecutively that she, dedicated to dance. So we brought some of our family, our parents and siblings there, and we had a commitment at the sacred tree. But then, of course, you've got to have like the fun kind of champagne wedding for all your rowdy friends. So we had that wedding where we exchanged rings, and we had these beautiful rings commissioned by a amazing artist. She's Pottawatomi and Ho-Chunk, I believe, by the name of Jody Webster. And we had those commissioned. We exchanged those at the fun kind of rowdy party wedding for our other friends on October 5th. And then at that point, we said, well, we've done 3. Why not Sacred 4? So we thought, okay, well, we'll do the Sacred 4. And our auntie and uncle, Valerie and Paul Johnson, invited us to Hawaii over the holidays between Christmas and New Year's. And we said, we'll do a commitment ceremony, just us 2. And then our auntie and uncle were there to witness. And we stood on the beach and exchanged leis and stood in the water.
Yeah, but you had me until the part she was like, okay, so we'll have our 4th wedding in Hawaii. I'm like, okay, great. She goes, on New Year's Eve. I'm like, this is awesome. She goes, right on the beach. I'm like, this is so good. And she goes, at sunrise. And I was like, you lost me. But I made it.
You're not a morning person.
Yeah, I know Shannon didn't get invited to that one, and she got invited to the Drunken Friends one, right?
She did.
I didn't get invited to. Yeah.
Oh, you did too.
You don't want her at your drunken parties, that's for sure.
Come on.
Yeah, but Tiger and I were just talking about the other day, you know, when it comes to, you know, our two-spirit people, and that's kind of a moniker phrase that started, you know, in the late 80s. And it started at a two-spirit gathering in Manitoba and Winnipeg. And our relatives there coined it Nij-Manadwuk, which means two-spirit. We were talking about that just yesterday, thinking how lucky she and I are to find one another. I mean, we met once and we were colleagues and friends and acquaintances, but then to come back full circle to find each other, it's, you know, it gives other people hope, you know, that are searching and looking for their life partner, especially if you're two-spirit, because, you know, our pond is so small. It's small. And, you know, for us to have our paths meet, and we're so compatible. It's sickening, actually. It's kind of gross, but you know, we have lots of fun together and respect one another, and we've both been in some kind of toxic relationships where we've both been used and not treated the way we should be. But you know, we just want to send it out there into, you know, the universe that, you know, to our two-spirit relatives, we didn't have to meet in a bar. We didn't have to, you know, search one another out on dating sites. You put it out in the universe, your spirit, that you're looking for another spirit to complete you and walk with you. It'll happen, because we weren't really truly looking at that time, but we were ready. We were just ready to be together, and the universe help make that happen. That's
awesome. That's one of the best relationship stories I've ever heard. I mean, you get that's true, because the same thing happened to me. You know, I waited a long time, but finally I met my wife, who was, you know, that to me. And but I wasn't trying, I wasn't looking, I was just waiting for the right person to come along, and it did. So yeah, for those of you out there, just keep waiting. Stay away from the toxic stuff. Just keep waiting until it happens.
So can you talk a little more about being two-spirit and what that means, and what you think other people, because I don't think a lot of Native Americans even really understand you know, our traditional ways when it comes to roles in our societies, and how that's been just, you know, washed out of our cultures.
Here's what I would say, because I'm a flipper. So
you gotta explain the terms. You gotta let us know, because
I started out with the presumption of heterosexuality for most of
Okay.
my life, and it never ever occurred to me, even though like from a long time ago, there were girls that I would meet that made me feel funny in my tummy. But it took a long time to be like, actually, maybe that's for me, you know, and like just thinking like, I don't even know what two girls would even do. I had no idea what we were supposed to do. So it took a little while to get my mind around to where I was comfortable there. And Shannon's experience was very different. We're sort of like perfectly matched in a lot of ways because we're so like, we just had such different experiences growing up. But I will say that just as an anthropologist, it's like, you know, there were some native tribes that had over 37 different genders back in the day. You know, tribes didn't worry about that sort of thing. Many tribes dressed children exactly the same from the moment that they were born and let them go with men, women, whoever, until they chose their role. And then when they chose their role, they would have the appropriate ceremony to join whatever gender that they decided they want to join. There were women warrior chiefs who took wives. You know, there were men who chose to be gatherers and you know, herbalists and medicine people in their community. You know, we didn't worry about these things before because it just didn't matter. The idea was to accept the appropriate role that the Creator had laid out for you when your spirit was made. That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. And it was a path that was congruent with your roles and responsibilities, not only to your family, but to your clan. So those things would be interwoven and work together. And being two spirit provided for some of our tribal people and communities their own place. They had sacred places and sacred responsibilities within the community, within the tribe to fulfill. And to this day, we're still uncovering that. You know, we're learning more. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to read anthropological narratives and observations and that type of evidence to find out more about what our two spirit ancestors did and who they were and what their stories are. But our blood memories are also opening up what our roles and responsibilities are. And if we listen to our blood memories and have faith and take our places, our rightful places within our communities, and be visible and be there, present, and go to ceremony and Sundance and go into the sweat lodge and take up those rightful places, you know, more of our two spirit responsibility and roles and sacredness will continue to emerge within our tribal communities.
Mm-hmm. Yay!
Yeah, colonization in the Bible did its damage on two spirit societies and our people too.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues to this day.
Yeah. But it seems like a lot of young people, like on TikTok.
She looks at, there's your cue, Roy.
Are expressing themselves.
So first of all, Lisa, thank you for dancing for us for 16 years. That is quite a commitment, and thank you so much. It means a lot. I understand your commitment. And then your story and how you guys have placed yourselves in your communities. It's awesome to see your spirit and how strong that you're committed to that. You know, that's to be commended because, you know, I see that community having struggles, especially within. I have some friends that are in the community, within the Indian community, that have struggled with it for years and years, you know, and high and hidden and all those other things, you know, on top of the outside of the community, inside the community too, they've had to hide. And so I admire that. And thanks for sharing. That's awesome. I mean, this is a whole new area the show is fairly new. This is our 13th episode.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think
I was going to say, yeah, lucky number 13. Huh? Hey, and it's on Friday too.
Hey.
But what's it? Today's not. No, today's the 10th.
Yeah. We're good, Roy.
Just checking.
Oh, and I remember this one young man so in love with Roy.
Oh, stop it. Let's not go.
Oh, I felt so bad for him. He loved you so much. Roy was so cute when he was young in his dance regalia and stuff like that.
Back in the day, right? Back in the day.
The boys and the girls just loved you.
The back in the 49 days. Yeah. But those days are over with. I'm all washed up and done for.
Well, getting back to what's going on in Mount Pleasant, I can't believe some of the work that you all are undertaking with the boarding school and repatriation efforts down there. I mean, you all are really doing some amazing creative work for healing. It could, we all need to be aware of what's going on out of Ziibiwing and out of the boarding school that you all are involved in, among other things. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
And I have some pictures and stuff, so if you want me to show anything, just let me know.
Sure. So, the boarding school story for this community began when we were developing the Ziibiwing Center. And that development started in 2001. And I'm so honored to be a part of that conceptualization development team to build the center and the permanent exhibit. But in the permanent exhibit, we were broken up into teams that were focusing on research and text writing, on imagery, on three-dimensional cultural materials, artifacts, you might want to call them. And we had gotten to the point in the design that we came to kind of the heart, unfortunately, the heart of the exhibit. And that center was the effects of colonization. And at that time, our team was confronting what we needed to present in that portion of the Debajimuyang exhibit. That means telling our story. And through that confrontation, many of us were confronting things within ourselves. We were uncovering truths that this country had hidden from us, growing up and matriculating through elementary and college, uncovering boarding schools and genocide and eugenics, and these type of truths that were hidden from us during our years going through school were coming up to the surface as we were uncovering research to present in the exhibit. And for many of my colleagues at that time, this was new knowledge to them. It was new that there was a boarding school era. For me, I came into the Ziibiwing team knowing that my grandparents, both maternal and paternal, were placed in boarding schools. But I didn't learn that until my early 20s, and I happened to discover that information on my own. When I was in college, I was in the stacks at the University of Michigan studying, and I took a break and went into the Anishinabe, Great Lakes Indian section, and I started pulling some books down out of the stacks, and one was the Merriam Report, and I started to read that, and it changed my life profoundly, because after I read and pulled some more books down about the boarding school era, I called my mother up. And that night I asked her, I said, "Mom, did Nan go to a boarding school?" My grandmother, Nan. And she goes, it was silent. And she said, "Why are you asking?" And I said, I just want to know. And she goes, "She did. She went to the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School." And I said, "Well, did she get hurt there?" And Mom said, "Shannon, I don't know. She never talked about it. So once I knew that realization, and I heard from my mom confirming that my grandmother had gone there, and I think I was about 22 years old at the time, all these memories started to just kind of flood back into my mind. All those times that she would be talking with some of her former schoolmates or friends, and they'd be speaking Pottawatomi. And as soon as I would come close enough to them, they would stop, and then they would start speaking English. And I knew she knew how to speak the language. And I would kind of sneak around when she'd have friends over, or they'd have a singing or a prayer group, a Bible group, and they would all be singing hymns and praying in Pottawatomi or Ojibwe. And she would always send me outside, but I'd sneak around. And so there were times when I would ask her, when I was spending time with her, I was like, Nan, how do you say this in the language? And I'd hold up a pencil, or I'd hold up an apple, and she would just be, oh, for heaven's sakes. I can't remember. I can't remember. So, probably the only word that I knew that she shared with me was Namush Nimukaji, which means dog, Namush. And that was probably one of the few words she shared with me. But in the course of developing Ziibiwing, we were confronted with all of this history, all of these truths that had been hidden from us. And it was very tough for some of my colleagues, some of my, volunteers and some of the researchers that work with us. It was tough for them because this was new knowledge. So that was kind of the beginning story of uncovering and unpacking that history in this community. So when the Ziibiwing Center opened, we presented the boarding school era and that part of the effects of colonization gallery in a very truthful way, but also a very gentle way, because we know that that story is our collective story, and we had to present it in a way that would provide more questions, but would also be gentle enough that people could take away, our own people could take away from that and start asking those questions, as I did to my mom. Did my grandmother, did my auntie go to that school? And that started the community conversation about the school, because before that, they were just buildings that lived and existed on the west side of town. They were just red brick buildings, and most people just thought, oh, that's the old state home. That's where, they used to put individuals that were homeless or had mental and emotional incapacities. That's where they would put them. They didn't know that prior to when the state took over the boarding school, it was a boarding school that was run by the federal government. And that boarding school existed from 1893 to 1934, 41 years of existence that it took our children and placed them in that facility.
Yeah, I have a similar story in my family. I knew my great-grandmother went to a boarding school, but I didn't really know what that meant. And so when I went to school and I learned what that meant, I brought that back to my grandmother and I said, I'm learning at school that, at boarding schools, the hair was cut, the children weren't allowed to speak their language. They were forced into religion and to work and be enslaved, and oftentimes adopted by non-native families just to work for them and work for their farms. And my grandmother, when I brought her that information back, I can still see her face and her eyes tear up, and her saying that, she finally understood why her mother was the way she was, why her mother wouldn't speak the language. When the children came into the room, the language stopped, and why she was just so mean. So it helped her, I think, forgive her mom and move forward from that. It's incredible that we didn't know what happened in those buildings. It was absolutely kept from us, and our children were forced to keep it secret.
Yeah, that's it's not a coincidence. It's obviously
Colonization.
colonization. Yeah, you've seen your moment. But it's obvious. Like Amy Anderson in the chat room, she just said it was silent for my family also. And Shannon has a story, and I have a story too. My grandfather was boarding school, and my grandfather, wasn't never right, and he wasn't silent, but he didn't speak of it. He was silent as to what happened to him, but he wasn't silent as who he was. I guess I should say. And then, of course, my father was taken from his mother and adopted out, but he grew up with another Native family after that. But our family was ripped apart by the schools and the damage that it had done and all that. And then I ended up being adopted out also. So it was just like generation after generation after generation of these stories of silence. And then another thing you said, it even goes deeper into that, because the Oreilles clan of the Caddos, they didn't move. They didn't go to Oklahoma with the rest of them for the land allotments and everything. During that time when the everybody was being replaced and displaced and all of those things were happening. But the elders were silent because they had, like you said, they had to hide, and they didn't want to be found out. But the community stayed together. All of those people stayed together. All the same names are still there for hundreds of years. It's strange that the thing that brought the Oreilles clan together. I mean, we have our powwow every year, but the thing that brought us together was there was a Catholic mission out there that was left in Louisiana, and the church kept records of all the families that were there. And one day, probably 35, 40 years ago, a new priest came to that church, and he started cleaning out the basement and doing all these things. It's in a historical old building. It's a very, very old mission church. And he found all these records, and he was going through them, and they were like literally from the 1600s and way back. And so he was reading them, and he noticed, wait a minute, this name comes to my church. This name here comes to my church. These people come to my church. They're the same families that have been here for decades. And then he found records that, the priests were hiding the Native people there at that time. So there was actually some good, I guess, being done by some of those folks. But the people themselves went silent of who they were. And I went home for a reunion a long time ago and met with my great grandmother's brother and sister. They were the only surviving members, and this was 40 years ago, back when they were in their 90s or something at that time, And I asked them, I said, so, I asked my great grandmother's brother, what do you know about who you are? And he said, oh, we're Scottish. Now this is a straight up, straight up Native man, not a drop of Scottish blood in him, right? But he swears he's Scottish. And then you go to his sister, and she swears they're German. Same thing, Caddo woman looks just like every other Caddo and they're sitting at the powwow, but they're claiming that they're German and they're Scottish, because they all had their story, their hide story. They were all hiding and didn't want anybody to know that they were Indian, and but they were doing what they had to do to be Indian. So they were still having their traditional dances, our turkey dance, or bear dance, those things. And it was quite interesting. But what's interesting to me is that these stories don't differ from family to family to family. We all have a lot of the same stories. We all tell the same stories, and and we all have the same heartaches when we start talking about these schools and what they had done to our families. Because Shannon says, my grandma would be in tears, and you say, grandma would stop talking about, she would stop talking in her native tongue because, that's what they were talking about. And it's over now for the most part. I mean, there's still things happening, but the damage has been done.
Mm-hmm. And the damage is it's being, as much as we can, we're trying to address that contemporarily in the work that we do out of the Ziibiwing Center and through our Tribal Historic Preservation Office, which is housed within the Ziibiwing Center. Back in 2009, Shannon, I think you have the photo. White Bison contacted us when they were doing a walk, and they traveled across the United States to raise awareness about the American Indian boarding school era. And one of their stops was right here in Mount Pleasant at the school. And we held a day of information, a day of speakers, a day of healing. And we walked from the tribal government building 5 miles all through across the town of Mount Pleasant, all the way to the boarding school property, which is on the west side of town. The reservation's on the east side of Mount Pleasant. So we walked, the tribal council, that's the chief at the time, Fred Cantu, and our youth led us, and our veterans, or our Gitchida, led us. That's a historic photo of the school. And that started truly a community-driven movement to address the era of that school, and for us as descendants to be able to share stories and to, these are repatriation pictures. Yeah. But that set things in motion more so on the heels of opening up the Ziibiwing Center, when the permitted exhibit was there for the community and the public to see and to learn from. Journey for Forgiveness started another movement. And my brother, Hunter Genia, was the director of the behavioral health program at the time. And, he received the call from Dan Coyes from the White Bison to hold this, to be a host site for Journey for Forgiveness. And it was a beautiful day. And we knew that from that day on, we had to continue to recognize the history and the trauma that school still, and how it still impacted us and impacts us today. And in 2010, our governor at the time, Jennifer Granholm, conveyed, she put into place Public Act 408, which was a land conveyance, because after the state of Michigan shut down the Mount Pleasant Center, which was the home for the developmentally disabled, that entire property was vacated and was unused, and it was state property. So Jennifer Granholm, Governor Granholm, contacted the tribe and the city of Mount Pleasant, offering a land conveyance for kind of a split of that parcel to the tribe and to the city for $1 deed. We had 6 months to weigh that offer and to engage our community to determine whether to accept or reject that land conveyance. And in that 6 months began some very rigorous research that we had undertaken at the Ziibiwing Center, and we brought in some contracted researchers to begin this, and Central Michigan University scholars were assisting us as well to begin uncovering the school and putting it into a feasibility study as we surveyed tribal members on their awareness and knowledge of the school and whether they would want to accept or reject it, the conveyance. We presented these findings to tribal council, and 75% of the tribal membership was compelling to accept the land conveyance. And of that 75%, we asked, what would you want to do with the land? And many of them said, turn it into a place of healing and education and an interpretive center. So on April 25th, our tribal chief accepted the land conveyance for a dollar deed. It was 8 acres of the former boarding school site that included 6 historic buildings directly attributed to the history of that school. From that point on, that feasibility committee turned into a volunteer working group committee called the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School Committee, and it's comprised of members from the tribe, various specialists within the tribal departments, and Central Michigan University scholars. And we work towards getting that property listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And in 2018, it was listed officially on the National Register. And from that point on, we're now beginning to work, and I'm going to turn this over to my wife, Lisa, who works in the Office of Grants and Contracts, to work towards the repurposed plan and the protection of the site.
Okay, so ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a grant writer, and that dream finally came true. So,
As a little girl, you wanted to be a grant writer?
yeah, when I was like 3 or 4, I was like, Mommy, I want to write grants one day. No, but here I am, and it's an amazing job, and it's really weird. Again, pointing back to like the coolness of like our little partnership here is that our work sort of dovetails and works together. So I came back to Saginaw Chippewa territory about 3 years ago, and was offered a job as a grant writer and started to work on some projects that were assigned to me. And one was the boarding school site, which was super intriguing to me. It's not only a really beautiful site and a really important historically site, but it's super important to protect it because of the 25 oldest Native American boarding schools in the country. There are about a dozen that still have buildings standing. And of those, this is the only one that is owned by a single Native American tribe. It is a very special site. So we have 6 historic buildings. 3 to 4 of them are reasonably viable for rehabilitation and repurposing, but we've had a lot of work to do. So, you know, we're fighting against some sort of basic work on like lead and asbestos mitigation and some EPA stuff, making sure that we can secure the site and make it safe. We're working against people who are simply misinformed and treated as like a ghost hunter site or urban exploration kind of stuff, and treated as sort of like a creepy amusement park rather than an important historical site that was a site of a lot of pain and suffering. So, you know, we've had a lot of uphill work to do, but we've gotten some amazing support from the National Park Service. We're starting to do some work around the 2 buildings deemed most viable for rehabilitation. We've got a committee on the reservation that's made up of tribal members and community members who are just super committed to the site. You know, there was talk back in the day about raising the site, and you know, and especially like when you look at it now in the context of this cancel culture thing, you got to look at what does that mean for these sites, you know, and we have to sort of fight against that, you know, right now, or I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have brought that up, but it's sort of like something that we have to think about the context of that, because it's important that we preserve, you know, not only a culture that validates a dominant culture narrative, but one that also holds it to some level of accountability, you know. So this site is super important. And, you know, we're making steps. It's a little bit at a time, you know, nobody's going to hand us, you know, all of the money that we need to do everything all at once, but we're starting to chip away at it, and we're like blocking it into sizable chunks that we can actually deal with, and do it a little bit at a time, and realize that it took a long time for this history to play out, and it's going to take a long time for this history to, you know, find its resilience and to be repaired.
And leading up to this, I think, you know, for the memory of those children and our relatives who went to that school. During the feasibility study that spanned from 2010 to 2011, we uncovered, our Ziibiwing Center researchers and volunteers uncovered about 123 students who perished as a result of the school. They either died at the school or they were sent home to die. Administrative records, in its 41 years of history, records that are on file with the federal government at the BIA indicated that only 5 children died during the 41 years of its operation. But to date, our research has continued. We're now at 227 children who died as a result of the school. So we are undergoing, some archaeological investigations, non-invasive. We're using ground penetrating radar, magnetometry, and soil resistivity to look at areas that we have researched, that we have found that are questionable. And that research is continuing. Unfortunately, many of those sensitive areas are on the city of Mount Pleasant's property. So because of that, we have to enter into MOUs and we have to negotiate with them to go onto the property to possibly try to locate unmarked graves or mass graves. So that's, currently where we're at right now. And luckily we have an amazing and most sensitive principal investigator by the name of Dr. Sarah Surface Evans, and she's at Central Michigan University. She serves on the committee, and she gives of her time and expertise to organize and to direct field schools to help us locate children and locate and uncover the history of the school. And the history means foundations too. We said there's 7 buildings on the site. 6 of them can be attributed directly to the boarding school era, but there were upwards of about 34 or 35 other types of structures on that 300-acre parcel. And most of those other structures were tool sheds and blacksmithing shops and barns. But it's important to find where those exact locations are so that we can GIS them and sort of map out what the original footprint of the boarding school looked like when it was in operation. And Dr. Sarah is helping us to find and uncover that footprint.
Wow. The chats, people are commenting in the chats again, common stories. And I've heard of the boarding schools, and I've heard of the mass graves that they found, and you think for a moment and you pray for it, and you keep it back in your mind with all the rest of the massacres and land grabs and everything else that's gone on. And for me anyway, obviously you guys, it's a different place because you guys are in it and working in it and doing your thing. But I really want to commend what it is you're doing, and being who you are, committing to dance for the people for all those years, and the work that you guys are doing for those, souls that have not only suffered in life, but are being forgotten or misplaced even after their death, which to us is important. Our place, and after we transist, is important to us as people. I shudder to think what happens to this place and the spirit of everybody, and the torment that everybody has to feel because of that energy. But the work that you guys are doing are actually changing that. And those spirits that have transist are now in a somewhat more comfortable place, I would think, because of the work you guys are doing, as far as I see it, versus somebody sticking it in their mind and thinking about it. You guys are actually working there to help that situation. And that's commendable. Thank you.
Make much.
Yes.
We have a day of honoring, healing, and remembering, and it built off that Journey for Forgiveness Day when we were on the site and we were able to have some healing there and have public speakers share information and have descendants just meet one another and walk the grounds. So on June 6th, every year we have a day of honoring, healing, remembering, where we invite folks up to the boarding school site, and we've had over 500 individuals attend from tribes all over Michigan and some from Canada who've attended, and it starts with the sunrise ceremony at a Mission Creek Cemetery, which has some attachment to the boarding school era because they say there are 2 students buried there. It's an old cemetery, and that land, that cemetery, was conveyed over to the tribe. So we start with a sunrise ceremony at the cemetery, and then we move to the boarding school grounds where we stage the entire day. We have a grand entry, and then in that grand entry, we developed little signs to recognize those 227 students who perished as a result of the school, and people will find their relative and they'll wear that recognition as they dance in. And we invite the tribal school. So the tribal school from the reservation buses their kids there for a pipe ceremony at 9 a.m. And we have anywhere from 5 to 10 pipe carriers who conduct a pipe ceremony on the grounds. And those children are then encouraged to interact with the pipe carriers, and they get to handle, some of their objects, and they're being taught what things are. And then we move into a day of invited speakers, guests, and musicians who provide public presentation all day long. And then it ends with a jingle dress healing dance and a sharing of strawberries as healing. And then the boarding school committee has a giveaway. And it goes from like 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it's unfortunately this year, due to the pandemic, we couldn't hold it, but it's June 6th. And it's an opportunity for descendants and those who, are still feeling those effects of their relatives who were in these schools. And I want to shout out to Alina, who mentioned that her parents went to the Holy Childhood School in Harbor Springs. That school, it was razed. It no longer exists. The Catholic Church wanted to get rid of it. They didn't want it to stand there as a reminder of the atrocities that happened. But we still have survivors within our communities right now who are, they're still working out and healing the abuses that they were subjected to in that school. And I think the important part of the work we're doing on the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School is to not erase that, but to provide it as a place to learn, to confront that history, to honor our relatives and ancestors and recognize what they went through, but also to teach the general population that this happened, because not many people out there know that this happened in our own country, that Indian children were stripped from their families and placed in these schools for well over 100 years. And I know this country doesn't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to. And they're fearful of what happened, with the lawsuits and the eventual Truth and Reconciliation Commission that happened in Canada. They're fearful that that's going to happen here in the States, and it needs to happen. There needs to be a public apology at the highest level of this country. The president needs to apologize for what happened to our people here in the States, because this is where it all started. It started in this country. Then it moved to Canada. Then it moved to New Zealand. Then it moved to Australia. But the model and that first boarding school, residential school model happened right here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, such a powerful history, and we don't even know where all the boarding schools were yet. There's an organization called the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, who is doing research on a lot of these issues and working to pull those documents together, find out where those schools were, who was in charge and in control of those schools, and who the students were. And some tribes have been able to repatriate their children back home. For example, from Carlisle, but there are other places that folks are still looking for their children, and we're still trying to uncover the truth. And it's so amazing how the Saginaw Chippewa tribe and everyone there came together to make this happen. I was fortunate enough to visit the school on a very, very snowy day with you all, and it was extremely powerful, and so grateful that I got to be there. I remember there was this wall, this one building in the back there. It was like a work hall or something, and there were things on the wall. Can you talk about that?
It's a boy. They called it the boys' carpenter shop. So of course, again, the effects of colonization with gender assigned roles. This is another thing the boarding schools did to our people, was to assign these various roles to our children and have them dress appropriately to those roles. And that was kind of another affront to, our culture, our ancestral spirituality, and our two-spirit people. So boys went to the carpentry shop, the girls went to the sewing house and the laundry house. But on the carpentry shop, they carved their initials into the brick wall. So there are 2 walls that have initials, or some of them carved their clan into the brick. So that's one of the buildings,
That's one of those forms of resistance.
Resistance.
That little bit of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there. These kids weren't just sort of letting everything happen to them. They were resisting. We've heard stories. There's probably people on your chat that could tell you those stories. I remember I went out there one time about 20 years ago to the boarding school site, and had an elder with me, and she told me, she's like, see that tree over there? She says, we used to hold hands and sing real quiet in Anishinabe, so we wouldn't get in trouble. We'd hold hands and dance around that tree, and if they'd come around, we'd switch to English. But so they were resisting. In fact, you have an ancestor who was resisting. Mm-hmm. But they're the kids, and they did try to fight back in their own best little kid way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing. It makes it feel a lot better that there's actually people going there and doing what you're doing, and having ceremony and making it a good place, trying to make it a good place for those spirits that have been, tormented. I mean, those.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like that too, about the work that Saginaw Chippewa Tribe is doing, and Ziibiwing and everybody, that they're sort of like not letting it only be like something that's stuck in history. It's, they're bringing the kids back there and giving them teachings there. And Shannon just held an event last year, Ziibiwing did, teaching basket making out there. And, they're not letting it fall into like history as if it's something that is stuck in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we received a Institute of Museum and Library Services Inspire grant, where we were able to provide a day of education on the site. And this idea came from tribal member youth that were in high school, saying, they let us know at Ziibiwing that, is there a way we can give guided tours of the site? And we said, absolutely. So we held a day of education there for high school students, and they bussed in over 400 students from about 4 area high schools to come and tour the site and learn about its history, but also learn about the cultural resurgence that's happening. So we had basket makers, we had regalia makers on site. So people were setting up different hands-on stations from the tribe to teach, contemporary and traditional art forms. And they also learned about environmental injustice and social justice while they're at the site.
Can I make? Well, on June 6th, we're gonna for sure on this show we're gonna recognize that day from now on June 6th.
Oh, wow.
We'll make sure that we're being thoughtful that day, and Shannon and I will put some up for you guys.
Right.
In remembrance of it. So I wrote that down. We're going to put it in our calendar. The other thing is, might I have a suggestion? The reason that I'm learning about what you guys are doing over there right now is because we're talking. And social media and this platform and platforms like it are making it possible for all of us to communicate. That's why I always we joke about my TikTok habit, but
I thought for sure you were going to start talking about TikTok and
native TikTok is the bomb. You got to get on native TikTok. I love it when my For You page is filled with natives. I love it. So that's what they say on TikTok. It's one of their things. And then of course hot Cheetos are another big thing. But anyway, that's the kids. Because of these platforms, and you talked about bringing people in for a day of education, you can immortalize that by doing a video tour and doing a video and putting it up on YouTube for people like us to link to and people to actually go and watch a program. You guys do your own. You don't need a videographer. You don't need somebody who does documentaries. You guys do that. You do tours over there. You guys spiritually know what that place is, what it means, and all the things that are there, obviously. So if you were to do a video tour, then people like myself, people like that are out there in the chat rooms can actually see what you guys are doing and what you're talking about. Because unless you dig, unless you know people like you don't get to hear these stories, and you don't really understand the gravity of what's happened in those places. Yes, we hear the story. Even me, being native, I've heard the stories, and I know that there's dead children on a lot of those properties, and that they're finding them and those kinds of things. But the real weight of that needs to be immortalized and put out there for people to see on a regular basis, in my opinion. So maybe that's something you guys can put together. Very simple. Just walk around with a cell phone and do a tour and put it on YouTube, and it'll be there for everybody to look at, and we can link them to it, and everybody can link them to it, and they can hear the story.
Well,
Yeah.
if the youth are doing the touring, that might be pretty cool.
I think we could. We've got some youth filmmakers in our community, some that have even been Sundance Institute fellows. So we've worked with them already, and they do some amazing work.
That would be cool.
That's a great idea.
That's a wonderful idea.
That's a great idea, especially now. I mean, that Ziibiwing, our staff is brainstorming and working with our community and trying to determine how we can provide access and programming and information in this pandemic time that we're in. So, filming and going virtual is a direction that we're going to have to unfortunately take, but it's also positive because it's going to reach an audience globally if it gets out there. So this could be a silver lining to get the information out there, and maybe we'll have a big whale who says, I want to donate millions of dollars to help you repurpose and revitalize, these buildings. And
one of these issues, whether it's Oklahoma getting, some type of land rights back or legislation rights back, or a dapple fall, or a boarding school being exposed, one of these events is going to become a black swan event, they call it, for Indian country, and it's gonna make things, it's going to put things in perspective for people out there. Yeah, everybody hears, or knows that Natives got a raw deal. It's known, and everybody sits back and talks about it, under their breath or whatever. Oh yeah, that was horrible what happened to them. That was horrible. Like, it's over with, they're gone now. It's over. But no, we exist, and they need to know that, and they need to know that all of these struggles, all of these things are still very, very real to us, and all of us today that are living. I mean, everybody here in this chat room and everybody sitting on this show right now has felt some pain, or his family has been affected by what you guys are out there talking about right now, by those boarding schools. So it's real. It's still happening. It's still open. It's still an issue for us. It's still something that needs to be talked about. It's still something that, like you said, at the highest levels needs to be apologized for, and reparations need to be made for it. And just like everything else that's out there, but one of these events is going to finally open people's eyes, and it's going to topple. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. I'm not like Shannon. I think that it's about ready. It's about time. Things are flipping. The seventh generation has been danced back. We are here right now, and we're getting stronger and stronger by the day.
So Lance says, what's a place to donate? So does, besides Ziibiwing, does Mount Pleasant have a any particular foundation or place where folks can donate?
We haven't started a foundation yet for the school. I mean, that's on our list of things to do, is to develop a fundraising mechanism so that individuals can donate directly towards the revitalization of the school. So we're going to start working on that. But at this point, Ziibiwing Center will be the donation site, and we will funnel that into that account for the purpose of the boarding school revitalization project. So miigwech, Lance, for asking for a place to donate. The Ziibiwing Center is the tribe's cultural center and tribal museum, and we house the tribal historic preservation officer. Her name's Marcella Haddon. So if you want to direct your donation to Marcella Haddon in the THPO office, and Ziibiwing's address is listed on our website. So miigwech for that, because that will help that spirit-driven, heart-driven energy that we need to revitalize and repurpose the site so that it can remain a place that provides the truth and provides healing and revitalization.
Man, you guys are an intense couple. Like, I mean, the kind of work that you all are doing, and you're doing it together. I mean, what's like an average day like for you all?
An average day is, Tiger will, muse around about, because we've been furloughed. We were furloughed for a few weeks, and then we have some days where we work at home, and then we work on site. But in those days, of course, as women, you don't have to be wearing bras. So one day she was musing, because of the way bras are, and they get uncomfortable and they fall apart. And she was just like, I want a bra made by Carhartt. She goes, Shannon, why can't Carhartt make me a bra? Those Carhartts last.
This is what you think of?
But this is what we talk about, and we'll have fun. We were just talking the other day about the intensity of our work sometimes, and responsibility, the beautiful responsibility we have for this tribal nation, Saginaw Chippewa, but for our people and for our families and our ancestors. And we were saying, what led you on this path? And I said, well, I wanted to be a blimp driver when I grew up. Then that changed to be a car ferry captain. But here I am now, and working as a tribal museum and cultural center director that works with an amazing team of people. We're small but mighty. There's 10 of us, that effectuate NACPRA for the tribe. And Willie Johnson is my curator at Ziibiwing, and he also serves as the chairman of the Michigan Anishinabe Cultural Protection and Repatriation Alliance. And that alliance is formidable. They're unstoppable with bringing our ancestors home. And
I'll let you work with Sonia, because we were watching your show with Sonia,
Dr. Sonia Adelai,
about the petroglyphs, because we were just up there 2 weeks ago. We're doing work up there, so it's like she leads me all around, and then I just try to find the money. That's it.
That's great.
So some of the chat room, and Sandra was saying, and the laws need to be changed as a result too. And then JD says, to this day, family members deny their or our ancestry due to Reconstruction and the atrocities. Families have become disconnected, lost, yet the ancestral spirit still lives inside. And my elder explained that to me as we were all being danced back. The 7 generations have passed, and we are people like yourself, Lisa, and you guys doing the work that you're doing are dancing us all back. That spirit is growing stronger in all of us, and I'm seeing it more and more. And the place that I see a lot of it is on TikTok, because the Native community is really expressing themselves on there, and they're fired up. These kids are fired up. I've always been, an activist for the last, 30, 35 years. We've, Shannon and I have worked in the community, done things for the community, been to protests, helped other natives with issues and those kinds of things, donated to reservations and heating oil programs and house buildings and all these things that we've done through the years. But the energy that I'm seeing today is there's something different about these kids and this youth. And it's like they have been danced back, and it's just almost natural to them that they're just part of the movement, that they're part of it. Mm-hmm. And it's because of people like Shannon and yourselves that have done the work for all these years, that I think that it's finally the consciousness is starting to flow back into Indian country, and people are getting fired up again.
Look at some of these pictures. I just wanted to bring up some of these pictures talking about being danced back and danced back home. I thought I'd pull these up, Shannon.
Yeah, this was a repatriation that we completed with the University of Michigan, where we brought well over 100 ancestors home from the University of Michigan. And I think this was a Fisher site. And unfortunately, with the Fisher site, the remains had been unearthed and had been desecrated through excavation and just being on shelves for so long. Their remains came back in 10,000 individual boxes. So it took us, with the community, about 10 days from repatriation, going to pick them up, preparing, and getting them ready for reburial. And that's an image of the community lovingly carrying the ancestors into the lodge for their recommitment ceremony. And these beautiful ancestors, were taken from a known burial site. So they had been given their own funerary rites, what we would call them. But because of repatriation and how they were excavated, unearthed, handled for science, the recommitment ceremony that is performed for them by our spiritual people is a ceremony that appeases their spirit where they're at. And their spirit is fine, is what our relatives tell us. The ancestors are fine. But there's a slight disturbance with them that they feel, because their remains were not allowed to fully go back into the earth. They were disturbed. Yeah. So in the spirit world, there's a slight feeling of disturbance that they feel. And when we're able to bring them home, lovingly wrap them and sing to them and pray for them and give them food, put them back in the earth, that recommitment ceremony is more of an appeasement for what was done to them when they were taken and pulled from the earth. And we pray for those ones who did that to them. We pray for the ones who handled them in these institutions and museums and universities, so that their life is not negatively affected. So we sing and pray for those ones too, for their healing. And then we put them into the earth, and Mother Earth is able to welcome them again, and all is right.
Oh, Icha. Love it.
Yeah.
That's good. That's so good. That is so good. Yep. I like it. I like it. You guys are a power couple. You guys are freaking tearing it up out there.
Well, you got to hang out in a parking lot with them first before you can say that.
Right.
So you really moved Roybal, JD.
Oh.
He said,
Oh, JD, come join us anytime in Saginaw Chippewa country. Come join us on June 6th. Anyone in the chat room watching, please come join us for the June 6th Honoring, Healing, and Remembering. Come join us for one of these recommitment ceremonies where we welcome our ancestors home. The tribal councils that have been put into place over the years, elected by their people over the years since we began bringing ancestors home in 1996. The tribal councils and leadership have taken a stand that these recommitment ceremonies should be open to people with a good heart that want to come and witness and be a part of it. And we've been criticized for that. The tribe has been criticized for letting the public or others come outside of this tribe to participate, but they feel, and in their good spirit, know that it has to happen. Otherwise, healing doesn't happen across this country. When more people know about our ancestors who are still boxed up and being used for study and are still being excavated or looted in some parts of this country, we're building advocacy, and we're building allies, and we're building individuals' knowledge to say that's not right. That's not right. And locally and within the state, inadvertently, private citizens may be putting in their underground pool, and they may inadvertently come upon ancestral remains. So it's up to us to, through MACPRA, to provide the information and understanding that contact the local tribe in your area, and they'll be there to help you to do what they can to mitigate what you may have inadvertently discovered. So as long as we get more information out there and allow the public to understand where we are at contemporarily and what has happened to us, we can only move forward in a better way.
that's awesome.
Yeah. And if you don't know what tribe is in your neck of the woods, then call the Association on American Indian Affairs.
Was that Sonia that was telling us about tens of thousands of ancestors sitting in storage, not on display? And I mean, it's even better that they're not on display, but horrible that there's 10,000 of them that they have no need or use for, that are just being hoarded.
I think we're talking more like 100,000.
Well, at her one
museum. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was at her one museum. There was tens of thousands of ancestors in storage that have no meaning or use whatsoever for them, other than they're hoarding them in boxes and in storage facilities. And it's horrible. So, well,
I have to share this.
Oh, Alexandra says, my mom, Lisa Martin, raised us to be strong, resilient, and indigenous. She took us to Sundance, and we went to school at Saginaw Chippewa Academy and language camp. She always said she wanted us to grow up with indigenous teachings and ways that she didn't get to know till she was a little older. She's been doing that healing work on an individual level for a long time. And I'm so proud of both my moms for all their work now to help our community heal. I'm so humbled to be your kid. I love you.
Ooh.
Oh,
Oh,
goodness sakes.
oh, Bushu, Alex. Love you too, daughter.
And
Madonna.
you guys are raising kids. Dang.
God. We have two beautiful kids and a beautiful son-in-law and lovely nieces and nephews and grandnieces and nephews. We're pretty blessed.
Mhm.
And none of them live with us, so that's also great.
We just now JD said you got him crying now he just lost it. He's lost it. And Lance still throwing it down. The Smithsonian has a bunch too. Yeah, that's something else when that apology comes. Maybe we can empty that place out too. Have big ceremony. That would be a great day.
Yeah.
So
we work hard on that. And when she brings them home too, they're so sweet when they bring them home. She takes care of them all night long until we can get them in the recommitment done. She takes care of them. So they're treated very, very respectfully. We don't treat them like they treated them in the museum.
We have a tribal elder. Her name is Ruby. And it's been her role for almost 8 years now, that when we bring ancestors home, whether it's at 7 o'clock at night or 3 in the morning, she will be there or she actually travels with us to go get them too. She'll go to Boston, she'll go to New York City with us, but she'll stay in the Ziibiwing Center with them and sit sentry with them so they're not alone until we can get them back in the earth. But she'll spend the night within the Ziibiwing Center, sometimes by herself, sometimes with her grandson. But that's her role and responsibility that she's taken up in this work. So those beautiful, beautiful heroes like that, unsung heroes that do this work. And it's hard work. Shannon, this is hard work. To bring our ancestors home. And it's long and it's exhaustive. It's rigorous. We're sitting across from tables from paternalistic minded, colonial thinking people who don't think we're smart enough to know the NACRA law, and they know it better than we do. But we turn them out. We show them up and turn them out, and that's what we have to do. We have to know the law better than them. And I got to give props to my brother, Willie Johnson, and Sonia Adelaide, who was on your show earlier. She's been our archaeological consultant on some of the toughest cases that we've had. One was with the University of Michigan, and now we're in a love affair with the U of M. Before it was contentious and awful, trying to bring our ancestors home. Harvard's Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, they're still on our list. We're coming back for our ancestors' associated funerary belongings. They kept them under the law of 10.11 under culturally identifiable human remains, but we're going to come back. They're not going to be forgotten. But Sonia and Willie, they study the law and they know it, and we go in there and we're all formidable. We don't let them push us around. Some of these retentive, uncompliant universities and institutions, we push them around. And that's what we have to do.
That's why I love my sister, and I give her a hard time for it, but she's a badass. She doesn't give up. She goes out there and she kicks some ass for Indian country. She don't play. And sometimes she does it to me, but maybe I deserve it. But anyway, she's a badass. And
coming sometimes. I mean,
and Alina, yes, you're right. That's our way. This is how we do it. This is what we do, and we need to support each other. And like you said, the unsung heroes. We need to, not that they're looking for it. They're definitely not looking for it.
No.
What was her name? You said your elder.
Ruby, our elder Ruby Mushabus.
So Ruby, she's not looking for it. She does that out of the goodness of her heart and because it's our way. And but thank you, Ruby, and please tell her thank you for us. And it warms my heart to hear that because that's what our people deserve, and it is our way. And I hate to start to cut us short, and I can definitely talk to you guys for a long time. Will you promise when as soon as you guys get some updates, or maybe you guys think about making that video or something, will you guys come back on with us and do another show?
Cool.
We sure will. We would love to.
Great.
We're going to keep pushing on. We have to.
Do
That's our way.
Yep. Do you
And
guys
we'll
have
try to
any?
figure out what TikTok is.
Well, yeah, we'll tell you when we get our own TikTok channel.
That would be
Please.
that would be cool. You guys, you gotta. Well, right now, what's weird is there's this this Chinese conspiracy thing about TikTok right now. So they're talking about canceling TikTok and getting rid of it because our Twitler, the Trumpo, the Tardo, whatever, he the TikTokers. Did we talk about this on the show, or were we talking about it before the show, Shannon?
No, I think it was before the show. Yeah,
So-
I didn't hear all of it.
So so what happened was this. So here's my little TikTok update for everybody. So when he did that whole thing in Oklahoma, his little get together,
Mhm.
the TikTok community came together and they sabotaged that thing, and they all ordered the free tickets to his rally, and over 1 million tickets were handed out for free. So they were expecting this huge rally, and it was going to be a big blowout. Well, it was all a bunch of fake people that weren't going to show up there, that all the TikTok community ordered his tickets. So only 6,000 people got to go in because all the tickets were gone. They were oversold. So that's why. So TikTok wrecked him. So he's pissed. And now they're even talking about, oh, we got to get rid of TikTok. You know, it's dangerous, but it's powerful. That little communication tool is powerful because, like I said, you go on there, Indian country's running strong on that thing. So there's a lot of controversy about it right now, as far as, China owning the app and everything. But I think they're afraid of what's happening because the communities are getting stronger. Whenever our government starts to talk about getting rid of something, you got to look at why. Why are they getting rid of it? Well, they just got jacked the other day, so they don't like what it's doing, how it's bringing communities together.
Right. Our youth are doing this. They're the ones who have the smarts in this stuff and the strength.
They had all those tickets and they jacked them, man. That was devastation for them. So anyway, so that's a little TikTok update. Do you guys have anything you want to close with or say before we run you off?
Well, I'm seeing a comment pop up by Shannon Wagner, and I want to acknowledge her.
Oops.
She's what Tiger and I call our redheaded spirit daughter. But she was part of a class at the University of Illinois, Purdue University, Indianapolis, under the professorship of one of our good friends at Ziibiwing, Dr. Holly Cusack McVeigh, and she came up for 2 years in a row with Holly's class for a 4-day, 3-night museum studies, like total immersion into Ziibiwing.
Wow.
Where they work for us. There were about 15 students and 2 faculty. They worked all day for 3 days on various projects. And Shannon came up for 2 years, and then she came up for a summer and lived up here in Tiger's old pad after I had Tiger shack up with me. Tiger was still paying for her little rental, so Shantern lived there, and then she interned with us for the entire summer, and then she got a job at the NMAI. So, when we think about our beautiful other hoops of people that other walks of life, and who take that beautiful spirit of being Anishinaabe and respecting culture, indigenous people, she truly took that, hook, line, and sinker, and loved working in Anishinaabe country. And then that moved her to work for get a job at the NMAI. And Ziibiwing, we always offer internships to non-native folks for that reason, because we need them out there. We need these young people out there from different walks of life to change the damn system.
Yep.
You know, our people, we're a small percentage, and we need to build our alliances and make friends and get them out there to help us. Awesome. And she's one of those, so I want to recognize her. But
thank you, Shannon. Your work is appreciated. Thank you for participating and helping.
Okay, love you guys.
All right. Well, hang out for a quick second. I'm going to bring you guys down. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you, and you guys are an amazing couple and doing amazing work. And you put shivers down everybody's spine today. So thanks again. And we will catch you the next time.
All right. Miigwech Roy, Miigwech Shannon, Bama P.
The cookie.
Let's see.
Wow.
There we go.
I've never been in a room with so many Shannons before.
I know. Shannon. Man. So wow, that was a great one. That was really good. And chat room, thank you for so much participation today. And thank you for all of our viewers out there. We had like over 40 viewers the whole show. I mean, this is like our biggest show, you know? So I was pretty happy to see that, and it stayed steady. And man, the people are starting to come. So hey, everybody, like, comment, subscribe on the video so that we can get the word out more. Tell your friends about us. And if any of you have suggestions, you know, feel free to drop us a message down below here, and let us know who you'd like to see come on the show here. And we'll try and do everything we can to bring them on. So we'd always like to talk to all of your people too. So anyway, anything you want to say before we close out? Because I got to run, Shannon. It's
yes,
so late.
I know. Well, let me make it quick. So next week, remember, this is our last Friday night show.
Oh, this is our last Friday night. It's going to be Sunday nights from now on, folks.
Yes. So next week on July 19th, that will be our first Sunday show, and it'll be at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And our guest, we're going to have another Northern Cheyenne attorney.
Hey. Oh,
Dion Killsback is going to be with us next Sunday to talk about staying close to culture and being an attorney. A very difficult thing to do.
Fun stuff.
Another intense legal conversation. And remember that this program was brought to you by the Association on American Indian Affairs. Go to our website, www.indian-affairs.org. Red Hoop Talk has its own little button there. You can get on all of our shows, and you can also get our email address and send us a request if you have a guest that you'd like to see on our show. That's all I got, Roy.
All right. Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next Sunday on Red Hoop Talk.
Next Sunday.
See you guys.
Sunday.